Stone, bronze, iron, and steel, even ceramic can have a sharp feel. If it's forged with a bevel and honed nice and level, a dangerous wound it can deal. Today, we're going to use a squash to talk about why a blade cuts. Hello again, everyone. Lauren back with you, and today we're going to talk about why a blade cuts into something. Not just how, but why. Why? What is the design? What makes this design, what about it means that it can cut into anything, really? We're also going to use this crepe pan in order to explain it. That seems really weird. What does a pan have to do with why a knife cuts? Well, science. We're going to talk science. Very simple science. We're going to make it as easy as possible. But it comes down to a few things. Blade geometry, surface area, and this pan is going to show us what we need. So, if we imagine any kind of frying pan, I chose the crepe pan because it has the thinnest edge of anything I have. But, look at that big flat surface. Now, if you are to swing this big flat surface at an object, a squash is pretty tough, thick-skinned, pretty tough, and you smack it, doesn't really do anything though. Look, we don't see any marks, we don't see any impact. There's the slightest little discoloration, and that's it. When we swing something with lots of surface area, we are pushing against the air, we're losing energy as we have to move through the air, and we have a lot of surface area contacting a lot of surface area. So, yes, you hit someone in the head with a frying pan, ow, maybe you knock them out if it's a hard enough blow, but a knife works differently. A knife works because it takes all that energy into the most minimal point of contact. We mentioned that in other videos before. So if I carefully now hit it with the edge, we can start to see that now it's marking the edge. So whereas we hit it with the flat and nothing happened, we can actually mark the toughness of this. Of course, if we're talking about an actual edge, then the geometry is even different. It's very refined. So we have to move to a diagram. Now I looked on the internet to say, hey, I want a picture of knife edge bevels, and I couldn't find anything that wasn't just kind of public use, public domain. So what I've done is I've drawn a picture, and we're going to have a little bit of fun here. So imagine that is your knife, okay? So we imagine this is this, okay? So there's our knife. There's just a quick representation. The edge of a knife is this bit right here. That's the edge where that red circle is. What that looks like is this. That is what a knife edge looks like. Maybe it's 0.5 millimeter, 0.02 of an inch, really, really tiny, and it's beveled. So that means it doesn't just come all the way down to a sharp point, like down to a few molecules. It's beveled. It could be single bevel, double bevels, there's hollow ground. There's a lot of things that you can do to the bevel on the edge of the knife, but it's so fine and so small that it's tiny. You really have trouble seeing it with your eyes, but that's what sharp blade means. Now, if you had a sharp blade and this point were actually off to one direction or another, like a little tail, that ruins the sharpness. So when we hone the blade, we are pushing the pieces back together so that it continues to form that point. So it's evenly distributed, so it's level on either side. That's what makes it sharp. So we have just, I don't know, a few hundred, maybe a few thousand molecules worth, rather than millions of them across at that point. And look how thin this is. So we're really talking about tiny, tiny, tiny edge. It's really thin. And this is what gets between the molecules of whatever you're cutting, and that's what cuts it apart. So that's why we use the pan to demonstrate that. Whereas we can say, this is totally thick, this is thin. Thick did nothing, thin at least left some marks on our little object. And we'll try again this might be a video where I actually have to do an edit because I'll have to set up to film on something a bit more stable than my hand, because I am not going to just attack the squash with the knife while holding it in my hand, because that's a trip to the hospital waiting to happen. I am not going to the hospital. Nope, not for hurting myself making a YouTube video. That is not what's going to go on a medical report for me. But another way to explain it, this will be a bit noisy and I'm sorry for that. What about this ruler? This ruler's pretty thin. But this ruler isn't going to cut me because it doesn't have this geometry. It doesn't have this shape to the edge. So I can do this all day and it won't do anything. Now, if I did that with a knife, I would be off to a trip for the hospital due to YouTube misadventure. I am not going to do that. So I'm not going to cut my hand with a knife, but it just goes to show, even if something is really thin, it has to be extremely thin at its edge. You can get a paper cut because a sheet of paper can be extremely thin. And if we magnify that edge of paper, the way it's going to look, we're going to see that it would be very different from the edge of this ruler. It would probably look a lot more like the knife. Now, if I hold the knife up close, we can kind of see the edge. You can kind of see that slight glow to the very edge of the knife. That little 0.5 millimeter, that's what we're talking about. That's what's sharp. And there's a lot of work to make sure to keep your knives sharp. Now, I haven't honed this recently, so it's not as sharp as I would like it to be. And it's probably safer that way when I'm doing just videos and handling it. Now, if I were to actually use it as a kitchen tool, I would want to hone it to be sharp. One rule of kitchen work or any kind of sharp-edged work, the sharper it is, the safer it is to you when you're using it on something else. So if you are going to cut a bunch of vegetables, like I'm going to cut this butternut squash for supper tonight, yes, it's also a meal, not just a video prop. That means I want a very sharp knife, because then I need less pressure in order to make the cut. Less work, less effort, less chance of my hand slipping, less chance of me going to the hospital with a big nasty cut and needing a bunch of stitches. That really should be the plan of everyone's day, is not to end up bleeding and going to the hospital for stitches. Yeah, that's a good plan. I like that plan. We won't do that. So when you forge a knife, it is being then ground and it's getting to this point, this tiny thin point, this little 1/10 of a millimeter thickness at the very, very edge. That's what makes a knife sharp. So remember, the tiny red circle, that's this whole big piece here, and the edge is just that tiniest little bit. That's what makes something sharp. So that's why a blade cuts, because it comes down with this angle. Now, it could be single beveled, so we could have the edge, let's see if we can draw it. We could have the edge look more like that, but it's still coming to a point and it's still balanced. So there are single bevel knives. I've found examples of that, but double bevel is pretty good. Then it's sharp from both sides. No matter how you slice and cut with it, it's going to work. And of course, the difference between a knife and a saw, just incidentally, saw has teeth to grab and tear and remove the material from what you're cutting. So it actually takes stuff out, and so you get leftovers. So if you're cutting a board with a saw, you get sawdust because it's ripping that out. Whereas if you can cut something with a knife, you are separating into two pieces and you get very little material removed from it. So when I cut the squash, we'll see that. Right, so that is our video for today. Do stay tuned though, don't tune out yet, because we will have a close-up of something being cut. We'll cut the squash with the messer in just a few seconds here. That'll be a separate little clip. But thank you for watching and learning just a little bit of this brief science look at why something is sharp and why it cuts. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, tell your friends. Hey, if they want to learn a little bit of basic science on why knives are sharp, maybe they can have a quick look. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great day. And remember to practice your knife safety so that you don't end up having to go for stitches. Alright, shall we see what the messer can do? Let's mess around. perfect cut.